Welcome to the Sportscard Lessons podcast with me, your host, Ken. I'm a retired teacher documenting my hobby journey here on the pod, finding teachable moments to share with all of you along the way. Don't forget to hit me up on Instagram at sportscard_lessons. Hit the follow button, and you can watch these episodes on the Sportscard Lessons YouTube channel. Welcome, everyone. How is everyone doing? Whether you're watching on YouTube or listening to the podcast, please hit the subscribe button and leave some feedback. Welcome to today's episode number 50, last episode of season 1. I can't believe I actually got here to episode 50. Quick note before I start. I am in the process of a move, so this episode 50 is going to be the last episode I tape in this office or record in this office. I am moving and I am building a new office in my new house. So I will be taking the next 2 weeks off while I move and prepare the new office. So I will be back on Thursday, the 29th. I'm changing up dropping the episodes on Friday to starting in season 2. I'm going to drop them on Thursdays. I'm hoping to do 2 a week, do the Monday and Thursday, but right now coming back, I'm going to be on Thursday, the 29th. I couldn't celebrate this 50th episode without my good friend, my hobby partner, and my traveling partner. Welcome, Rob, Sportscard Therapist podcast. How you doing, buddy?
Ken, what is going on, man? I was going to bring the streamers. I was going to drop the confetti for you. Episode 50. This is unbelievable. I tell you, man, it seems like just yesterday that we were driving to a show in New Jersey and you were like, you know what? The podcast I've been doing with my nephew, it's fun, but it's just like, I don't feel passionate about it, but I feel like now that I've dipped my toe in the water with the podcast game, I could really see myself doing a sports card podcast. And I could remember almost exactly where we were. We were about to cross the George Washington Bridge, and and I was like, dude, that would be freaking awesome. That would be awesome. And here we are, episode 50. Unbelievable, man. I mean, your podcast has truly become my favorite podcast to listen to. I
Man,
kid you not. My favorite podcast to listen to. Every time it drops, first thing I do, wake up in the morning, I play it, man. So congrats. 50 is huge. 50 is huge. So 2 weeks off for you, well deserved. Well deserved. I know behind the scenes your life has been kind of nuts and chaotic. And if anyone's ever had to move or sell a house or buy a house and have to do all that, you know the chaos that can ensue. So taking 2 weeks off for sure. And I like the fact that you're switching your days to Thursday. It's almost like it's a new you. I mean, there's so much that's going to be different in season 2, right? New day, new office. There's going to be a new background for people that are watching on YouTube. So that's pretty cool, man.
yeah. And I'm working on a new intro for the YouTube. So there'll be
Love
a
it.
nice little intro coming in there. So yeah, lots of improvements, lots of growth. And growth, I think, is probably the key word, because when I look back at episode 1 and even before episode 1, just where I was in the hobby then, to where I am now, from the podcast, where the podcast has gone, where my case is at the show, where just my hobby lane in general. I just the growth that I've had from the beginning, my entry into the hobby, but then even this entry into this podcast too, which really helped me just bring what I was doing, just what I noticed, just what I saw, and I wanted to bring the lesson aspect to the podcast, to the listeners.
Well, I tell you what, man, I'm definitely completely feel you on that. I think back at my show and just the maturation that I went through in the hobby because of the show, and because of the hobby, the show went through that maturation as well, and we had talked about it a couple episodes ago on the content creator roundtable that we all did, and you know, watching you evolve in real time, both in the hobby and the podcast, has been phenomenal. You know what I mean? It's like it just feels like, in life, we're either moving forward or backward. That's at least my belief. I believe that we're never just standing still. I believe that we're always kind of moving either forward or backward. And I feel like it's just been a consistent forward for you over the course of the last year.
Well, I've had a great mentor too, right? I've always talked about, being able to be a sponge to look at, what people are doing around me and what they're doing well, and try to emulate a lot of that. And of course, having you right there and being, your podcast being my favorite podcast. I've never missed an episode. My go-to podcast. That and you've talked about it, I've talked about it. I've always felt like I've been kind of 6 or 8 months behind you, and it's funny at times where I see you going through things and I'd say, why is he doing that? Or I wonder why, he's switching that up. And then it would be about 6 months later, it would like the light bulb would go off and I'd be like, okay, I understand it now. I understand. And then, and as much as I tried to create my own lane, it just felt like I just kept coming back because I think the footprint of the podcasting, things that you've started, things that you've done, is you're very successful in. And even though I ventured off a few times, but I've seemed to kind of come back because I can see what works, and I thank you for being there and being a mentor to me.
Well, definitely, man. Definitely. I appreciate that. Thank you for that. And I tell you, man, I get no greater joy than seeing those around me succeed as well. I feel like if you were to have started your podcast, and your podcast would not have taken off. Meanwhile, mine did. It would feel very uncomfortable. You know what I mean? It would be like, but just as many people are coming up to you, when we're at shows and commenting on your podcast and saying how much they like it and stuff like that, and your streams, your views continuing to go up, and it's not about the streams or the views, but at the same time, it shows that you are making that connection with people, and you being a former teacher, and that being the title of your podcast, Sports Card Lessons, better than anyone that when you know something, it takes it to a different level when you're teaching others that thing that it almost ingrains it in you even more. So when I've kind of walked you through how to do the podcast, or you and I have kind of talked back and forth about, oh, what's your podcast going to be about this week, what's mine going to be about, it's like steel sharpens steel. It's I wouldn't be as sharp as I was right now if you didn't start your podcast. I know that for a fact.
And I'm sure it's a lot of this, conversation, all conversation, this conversation that we have in the hobby. And sometimes we talk and people might think like, do they ever get tired of talking about the hobby? But we talk about everything, right? I mean, even though we're talking about the hobby on the way or to a show, whether we're driving together or we're just on the phone, we're talking about cards, we're talking about the show, but we're talking about a great deal of all kinds of other things, right? So not only, and I guess the point I'm trying to make here, it's not only and you talk about steel meets steel sharpening, right? uh, I think that as a person, right, there's a lot of things that, I mean, it works out well with the podcast, but just as a person in life, I like a lot of the stuff that we talk about. It's important, right? It's not just throwaway stuff. And I think that um even at my age, it helps me grow, right? Because there's an age difference between the two of us, right? So sometimes you're talking about things and I may say, oh, I have no idea what you're talking about, explain that to me, right? So now being the teacher I am, always being the student, like, learning from you. And I guess that's what I'm trying to say. I'm learning more from you than just the hobby stuff, and just the not just the podcast stuff, but just like in life in general. I'm learning so much more.
Yeah, definitely. It's like last week when you were really educating me about the silent film era, just you, just what it was like in the 1920s and things.
Here we go. Here we go. Sherry's gonna love this comment. She says, "Why do they refer to you as a gentleman of a certain age?" It's like, what the hell does that mean
I
anyway?
don't to me that's like the polite way of saying like just older. I don't even know, but it's crazy because like obviously, so you're 57, is
Yep,
it? Okay, so
57.
you're 57, but mentally, how old do you feel?
35. Like
35.
honestly, 30, 35. And I think, like, in my mind, that, and I'm going to give you like a few examples here. We were just talking about getting ready for this move, and saying, initially I said, you said, "Are you going to take time off from the pod?" I'm like, no, no, I can do this. I can do everything. I can get the move going. I've got contractors, I've got plumbers, I got electricians, I got floor carpeting guys, I got wood floor guys, I got painters. Like, I got all this, right? I'm a week into it. I'm 5 days away from moving, and I'm like, yeah, I need 2 weeks off. you know, I Nothing's getting done on time, right? And then it comes time to move it. I'm like, I think we could move most of this stuff myself. And I started packing boxes and moving stuff. And I'm like, well, we better tell the movers we're gonna have more to move than. It's just like in your mind, like you really think and you start doing it. And I don't know if that's just being wise at this point at my age, just saying I'd rather just spend a little more money and let everybody move the stuff than, getting into it and lifting all this stuff myself. So yeah, it's interesting. Like, you don't know that yet, but for someone, when you're kind of at my age, like, you think you can do everything, and then you realize sometimes you're like, wow, maybe I need a little help here, or maybe I'm not going to get to finish it. And I'd be the first one to say I can do anything.
Yeah.
um, and I try to use my brain more than my brawn at this age.
Yeah, man. And let me just say, I think to bring it back to the podcast, I think one thing that I've really taken away from your podcast over season 1, over the first 50 episodes are just, you are just an amazing storyteller, and you really paint the picture of a show, okay? Because I mean, it's the same. Even if I was at the show with you, right? Even if I was at the show with you, it's that concept of if you have 5 people that see a car accident, you're gonna have 5 different versions of what happened, but when I listen to you talk about the show and everything you've seen, like I really feel like I'm reading a book. I feel like I'm watching a film. It's so vivid with your storytelling, and I think that's probably one of the biggest things that probably draws your listeners in. I'm not sure how often you get that kind of feedback from people, but your storytelling about the shows, your storytelling about the deals, about the negotiations, um, they're great. They're great. And I feel like I'm a smarter negotiator by listening to the deals that you've discussed.
Hmm. I get a lot of feedback of people that say, like, I feel like I was at the show, when I get into situations, or I feel like when I tell the story of anything, I feel like I was a spectator at that table, watching the deal go down, that type of thing. Um, I do have to say, um, two things that I think have really helped that is one, um, teaching in a prison where they and you work in the prison, they have very little contact in the outside, right? So when I'm coming and I'm teaching and I need to, bring real world stuff to them, um, I have to do it so everybody can understand it. And being dyslexic, I know I can only learn certain ways. I can't, I'm not a traditional learner. So being a teacher, when I go in, I can't expect all my students to be traditional learners, right? So I have to come in and I had to create a lesson plan that helped everybody in the classroom learn, where I didn't have to take up a whole day teaching the same thing 4 different ways. If I figured out how to teach it one way where everybody could get it, to me that was a home run. So I think being a doing that for so many years, no matter where I go, in my mind, I even now, I don't even teach there now. Even now, when situations happen, I all of a sudden I flash in my mind, this would have made a great lesson plan. Right. I don't even teach anymore, but I think in my mind, wow, that would have made a great lesson plan if I was still teaching. So just, my mind is always working like a teacher.
Yeah, yeah. And thinking back, so I'm kind of curious because your last week's episode, which I believe was episode 49,
Mhm.
um that was one of my absolute favorite episodes of yours, and it was who makes the rules on trading. And you had talked about your dealings with one certain dealer, and but really I know you referenced throughout, you sprinkled in different situations and scenarios you've been in with other dealers. So when you are sitting there and you're negotiating with someone on a card, right, whether if it's a trade, but we'll use trade because of your last episode, as it's going on and as it feels like it's just going in the toilet bowl, the deal, and you're just getting fired up and miserable over this thing, in the back of your mind, are you already saying, yep, this is my next episode, this is great content right here?
Yeah, I say this is something I got to talk about because and I'm not getting, and me, I don't get upset. Like I'll go through this whole thing and I'll be like, really? Oh, like I'm taking it all in. And sometimes people think, oh, I got this guy hook, line, and sinker, until I'm like, yeah, no, I'm not an idiot. I'm not doing this, that type of thing. But yeah, I'm always thinking that. I'm thinking that at a show when something this is happening at a show. I think to myself, is this good enough content that I can take home and put on this week's episode all the time, and not even from the show, and whether I'm looking to purchase something online through like Instagram or Facebook, or I'm going to a card show, or as a spectator, or I'm going to an LCS, I'm always thinking, is this good enough content that I could put on the podcast?
Yeah, yeah. And
Yeah.
I can remember it was I think episode 27 of yours. It was toward the end of August, and it was discussing your negotiation style. And it was discussing and I think a lot of your content does circle around the social aspect of the hobby, right? The social aspect, from because your negotiation style, that just says so much about you, right? So when you're sitting there and you're planning out an episode like that, I'm not sure how well you remember that episode, that was so long ago, right? I mean, it was 4 months ago.
Yeah.
But what goes into an episode like that? Like, walk me through so far, episodes 1 through 50, what your preparation is like for an episode like that, and what can inspire an idea.
Um, I think the preparation has been different from the early episodes to the later episodes. Um, I think the early episodes, when preparing for those, I tried to find every little bit of content that I thought I could use as a lesson, like something I could teach, something I could come and say, here's something I'm going to teach. And in the earlier episodes, uh, I felt like I was bringing a lesson all the time. And I think at some point in the episodes, I got away from the lesson and I was just bringing the stories with probably not a lot of lesson, not a lot of things to learn, but more like entertaining stories. And I would have to say it was somewhere in the 30s where you said to me, you had mentioned to me, you kind of got away from the lesson part of it. And I thought to myself, and I said, you know what? You're right. You're right. And these are the things like I was talking about that, we talk about in little comments like that, that you notice something or I notice something. It really helps. It really helps me kind of refocus. So and I think, and I'm going to answer your question, but I think when it probably around episode, I think like 38 or 39, um, my strategies with the current state of the hobby. I think that was 39. I think that's where I kind of refocused and I said, I'm going to get back to the lesson part of it and maybe cut out some of the fluff that I was adding into the episode that maybe, like some people liked and some people didn't like. And um, it was taking the episodes from say 30 minutes to 45 minutes or 50 minutes type of thing. So I kind of cut them back. I focused more on the lesson, and I felt more comfortable doing that. And a lot of the listeners, a lot of feedback, just great episodes. And you just said too, like your last episode 49 was your favorite episode, and that was just focusing on a lesson. So what goes into that part, focusing on a lesson? And we talk about anything, any invention in this world, right? That people are solving a problem. When somebody invents something, they're solving some type of a problem. So I'm not trying to invent anything, but if I see that something can be done better, or something could be done different, or something that's just being done wrong, that's what I'm going to talk about. So when I come across those things, I get excited, because you've got to come up with. So you do a lot of interviews, and I haven't. My first season, I haven't done a lot of interviews, so I have to come up with content every week, right? So doing that, when I have these situations, I get excited. I'm like, okay, this is great. This is something I can focus on and really pay attention to. And then the wheels start turning. So this happens say on a show on Saturday or Sunday, or maybe a show I went to, or maybe something. So now I've got good 2, 3, 4 days to work on this and work on this content. And it's always going in my mind. I mean, I'm not sure about you or other people who do podcasts, but as I get this, this scenario happens, I start going over it and over it, and I fine tune to the point where I sit at a microphone, right? This has already happened, 25 or 30 times in my mind. So it's easy. And this is the same thing I used to do as a teacher. All right. I would jot notes down for a lesson plan, but I would roll it through. And when I got to the classroom, they got the best version of that story. Just like on the podcast, I'm hoping my listeners are getting the best version of that story.
Wow. Yeah, absolutely. And well said, man. And so we have an idea of how the podcast has evolved, right? That's kind of what we've touched on, like how the podcast has evolved from episode 1 to episode 50 now. I'm kind of curious, how have your cards evolved since the start of the podcast? And I don't mean since the start of you getting in the hobby, but I'm curious about the start of the podcast. So, looking at your podcast episodes, what I'm seeing right now is episode 1 was March 17th. So, right around that March time, how have your cards evolved?
It's funny you should ask that, because as I'm packing up my office here, I'm pulling boxes of cards, slabs that I forgot I even had, right? That
That's a pretty good problem to have.
Well, it's a good problem, but then you look at them, you're like, oh, I remember why I put this mistake in the closet. But
Yeah.
there was an episode, I'm not sure what number it was, but it was called My Biggest Card to Date in the Hobby, right? And I was laughing because I think about that episode, because I think the card was like a $2,000 card.
May
And
26th, my
and
biggest hobby deal to date.
and to me, that was huge. You remember that.
Yeah,
That was a huge deal for
yeah.
me to purchase this card because I'd been in that low lane, that 1, 2, 300, 400. I think before that, the biggest card I had um, was probably a $600 or $700 card. So that at that point with that card, that was kind of that first step, right? And then you said that was in May, right? So by the time I got to national, I had some Brady rookie and some Josh Allen rookie. So I started, I can look back at that and talking about these bigger cards that I had, but how has it changed? Because I think I was buying those cards to put in my case, where now I still have the cards in my case, but now I'm buying cards for myself. I'm buying cards for my own PC. I'm buying cards that make me feel good, right? So my collection has changed. My PC has completely changed, and I still have my first 3 or 4 PCs, right? And I'll call them my side PCs now because now my biggest PC is the hockey, as you see behind me in the case. Um, but it's become a lot more fun for me. It's like more of a feel good, to go out and buy. Well, you buy cards that you love. I mean, it just feels great. Where I was buying cards that I wanted to put in my case because I wanted to have big cards in my case. And they may not necessarily have been the cards I should have been putting in my case, but they're the cards at the time I did put in my case. But now I'm much more focused of the cards I want in my case. So I'm very particular about. I mean, I was just buying, I was buying a ton of stuff to put in my case just to see what would work. And now I'm pretty particular about what I buy to put in my case at shows. So definitely my collection, my PC has changed a number of times, but it's changed for the better. And I think my cases, at the shows have changed, but that's really based on what I'm going to sell, right? What I think I'm going to sell. So, if and I talk about getting ready for a show in 2 weeks may start now. It's not going to start, a week before. It's, who's hot, who are some cards I can throw in my case that I know are going to sell right away and I can make, a little bit of profit that could pay for the day, and that's all I need.
Yeah, and you kind of stole my thunder with what my next question was going to be because you had mentioned the hockey and what I wanted to ask was tell me about the excitement you feel now when you think about buying hockey. Doesn't it almost feel like when you switch lanes in your PC, and I'm not saying that we won't ever go back to the lane we were in before, right? But
Mhm.
when we switch lanes in our PC, it almost feels like we're discovering an entire new hobby.
Well, I talked hockey was my life, right? I grew up playing hockey. I was skating at 4 years old, right? And I played hockey competitively, up into my mid to late 20s. And then I started coaching my own kids. And that was a whole other 10, 12, 14 years of coaching with them. So I knew everything about hockey. I knew everything about hockey from the early 70s up to now. And
And
when I got
you were quite the enforcer. You were quite the enforcer.
it, well, I was the goal scorer kid, but we don't,
Oh,
you
so
would have
you
been
were
the,
Sid
you
the
would have been
Kid.
the enforcer. You needed that height, but hockey was really in my blood, growing up, and it was in my, with my kids and everything. And when I got into the hobby, I had a lot of, cars from the 70s and 80s, with hockey. And when I first started, where all the card prices were blowing up everywhere, I go back and look at all these hockey cards and they were worth nothing. So I just kind of put them back and I just kind of said, well, I know enough about hockey, but there's really not a big lane in hockey. I mean, it's more for me, it's going to be football, right? And I I did a little bit with tennis, I did a little bit with wrestling and things like that. And then I just decided, if I'm going to PC stuff, it should be stuff that, everybody talks about and you talk about it. It's the, from when you were a kid. It's the things you remember as a kid and the players and things like that, and the nostalgia. And that started getting to me when I bought a couple Gretzky cards, and I'm like, oh yeah, these are nice. And then I bought some Lemieux cards. I'm like, yeah. Then I bought some Ovechkin cards. I'm like, all right, I'm on to
So
something
when
here.
you bought those cards, what were the feelings that you're talking about?
Um, because of the players that I've watched, there are people that I watched. I sat and watched them play, and I knew they were great players. At one time, I wore a number 66 for, a Mario Lemieux, So I mean, they're just players that I watched. They're players that I watched. They're players I watched with my kids, players we talked about. We would go to like big hockey events, and they would be there. Some of these great players would be there. So they've always been just part of my life, and I go back and I'll say something like, oh, I met Bobby Orr a number of times, and people look at me like, what? I'm like, yeah, I mean, Ray Bork, I met him a bunch. Like all these people, these, professional hockey players I've met just from being involved in hockey and knowing people in hockey. So uh I jumped back into it, and I knew like I'm buying players that I've met, that I knew, that I watched playing, and it feels good. And I'm not worried about everything else I was buying. I was worried about, oh, well, if I buy this, the price could go up, or this could double, or if I buy this and hold this a year from now, it's going to be worth X amount. I don't even think about that. Sometimes I talked about buying some cards, um, some Ovechkin cards. Um, a couple weeks ago at a show, I never even looked up the comps. I mean, I stood there and I talked to the dealer on it, and I just said, "Are there comps?" And he pulled his phone out and said, "Well, I see this and that, but they are Ovechkin. They are from like 2012 or 11, and this was what was so." And we just talked about, and I bought the cards. I mean, I wasn't worried about what because I just wanted to buy the card to put it in my case, and I felt if I was paying, if I wasn't overpaying or underpaying, if I was within that area, then I was fine with that. And I'm happy to buy those cards. And this is the first time I'm making purchases where I'm not so fixated on the price, on the comps, on exactly what I'm paying. Like I'm just saying, if I'm within range, I'm going to take it because it's just going to go in the case behind me. They're not going to shows. They're not for sale. I'm not putting them up online for sale. I'm just going to keep them because they're my PC.
Wow. And it's crazy because for the last year or so, more than that, for the last year and a half to 2 years, a question I would ask you from time to time is, well, what's your PC? What are you PCing? Like, what are you PCing? What are you collecting? Who do you, and you're like, well, I obviously the Chiefs are my team and I love Mahomes, and I'm like, so why aren't you buying Mahomes? Like, why aren't you buying Mahomes and holding it? And you're like, I don't know. Good question. I don't know. I'm not. It was like I'm not ready, right? Like I don't know, and I think it felt like it's exactly what brought me to my PC. Because there isn't anything that I PC that's modern. When I think about what IPC, the one modern card I have is the big LeBron rookie auto, but that's because that was a huge investment part of my season two, whole
Mm.
deal. But everything else, everything that I personally collect is really rooted in memories that are decades and decades old.
Mm. Let me ask you a question. When when you think about your PC and some of the higher end cards, and this is something that I've debated about and we've never talked about it, and I just want to throw that question out to you. because I know getting ready for, and you talk about putting it out there in the universe, right? You're saying if you're looking for something, put it out there in the universe and it'll happen. And we're coming to the end of the year. And last year we messaged, it was, I think it was New Year's Eve, we were messaging, there was me, you, Craig, New York City Sports Card, and maybe one or two others on there. And we were saying, top five. What's on your top five list to happen this year? To go out and get these cards this year. And preparing for the end of the year, I've been just thinking about this. But doing that, I'm thinking more of my PC. And there's been a few times where I thought to myself, maybe I'll take one of my big cards out of my case, right? Out of my going to shows to sell, and move that towards a PC card. And I just wanted to talk to you, your feeling about that. Have I know you moved, like, I think a number of your PC cards to get into your big LeBron, but were there cards that you really expected to sell at a show that you took out and you maybe made a trade with them to get into something that was going to be a PC that wasn't going to go back, and that was going to stay at home when you went to shows?
Oh, yeah. I mean, all good questions. I don't know if there's an easy answer for that. I think last year when I put it out, and I'm definitely going to be putting it out again this year, what's the top 5 cards you're hoping to acquire in 2023? And I'm just such a believer in the law of attraction. I'm not like I'm not someone that believes in a lot of hokey things or whatnot, but I do believe in positive energy. I do believe that whatever you focus your energy on will come back to you. And, by focusing on what you want to achieve, that positive energy will track those achievements. So I do believe in that. I also believe I'm not an idiot. I believe in the fact that we have a podcast and we have a platform. So if we want something or if we have a goal, if we put it out there, I think other people, most people in the hobby want to see you succeed, right? So even if you don't have a podcast, if you have just a Twitter account or a Facebook account or an Instagram account, that's still your brand. That's still your platform. So put it out there. That's definitely what I would recommend. Now, in order to get that massive LeBron card that I got, um, I wouldn't necessarily call the cards. There was one card that was a big PC card that I moved, and that was the 51 Bowman Mickey Mantle. That one hurt to move. Luckily, thankfully, um, the card gods, the law of attraction, whatever you want to call it, put it back in my life at the East Coast National in August. And that's the one that's, sitting behind me right there. But the other ones, it was just like, I knew I was working toward that big LeBron card, so I just continued to acquire high end liquid cards. Remember I got the Bowman Chrome Brady rookie PSA 10. At the time, comps were like 16K. Remember, you and I, we drove there together, and I met the guy at the show that morning. We had already made the deal a few days ago. I met him there. Boom, made the exchange, and I had it. That card, I didn't necessarily think I was going to hold that for the rest of my life. I knew it's like holding a bar of gold, pretty much, right? Like, and it's like, okay, when it's time to cash it in, you cash it in.
Yeah.
But for me, the reason why I usually bring all my cards with me to the shows is because at least like on my show and your show to an extent too, I feel like you focus a bit more on the social aspect of the hobby, like we were talking about before. And which is strange because you would think that that would be me being, licensed therapist, but I feel like I focus more on maybe, and not that I want to compare mine to you, so I shouldn't say that, but I put a lot of focus on the cards. So I put a lot of focus on the cards themselves. So when people come to my table, they see the LeBron. They say, "Oh, there it is. There it is. There's the LeBron. Up, there's the mantle. You brought the mantle? You're selling the mantle?" I'm like, "No, I just have it here." So, but it's a nice, and I think you even said it. I think you might have said it on one of your pods. Having having some heat that you really aren't intending on moving is a nice way to like get people to kind of stop and reverse a little bit,
Mm.
um, and and just kind of take a look.
Mhm.
Take a look around.
Yeah,
So rather than, because people speed walk past cases at shows, and I know because I do the same exact thing,
yeah.
but that's because I'm sneaking away from my table for 10 minutes. I'm like, hey, Ken, can you watch my table for 10 minutes?
Mm.
And I know I don't want to be rude to you
Mm.
by having you watch my table for an extended period of time. So I'll speed walk past cases, you know what I mean? Looking like a chicken with my head cut off, just seeing if there's anything that interests me. And usually all I'm doing is looking for some vintage. So um, yeah, I don't know if they answered the question at all, but
Yeah, pretty much. I mean, like I'm at a crossroads now too, and it was almost like something that's just been on my mind. Like, do I take some of my cards that, I don't want to say they're investments. I mean, it's a business, right? It's a hobby, but it does cost money to go to these shows and to set up and to buy the table and stuff like that. So you have to sell something, right? You have to sell something. I mean, you have to get some positive income, to make the whole thing work. Although I just love the people, like I love going out there and I love seeing all the people and talking to the people, and it's I'm not as hyper focused on getting sales. It's always
yeah.
nice to have a sale, but now I'm almost at a point where, like, it's I've built up this inventory in my cases, and I don't know if I'm going to take some of them, like a higher end card out of my inventory in my case and turn around and move it into a PC card that's not going to get in the case. It's going to be on the wall, behind me, or into my PC. And I'm just curious what your feelings were on that, if you felt that.
Listen, that's all I've done, I feel like, for
Mm.
the majority of my time back in the hobby and on the podcast. I've went into great excruciating detail talking about how I've just continued to move cards to level up to cards, move cards to level up to cards. And I talked about on a recent episode one of my roundtables that I've been doing. All these roundtables are like blurring into another one, but someone had mentioned on the YouTube comments how the term grail just gets used way too loosely. And my response back to that comment was, and I don't respond back to every comment, but I do like to because it's not like I'm getting thousands of comments, so the comments that I do get, I do like to show that, like, hey, I'm appreciative of it, I'm checking it out, and I'm going to comment. But I said, listen, my idea of a grail continues to change and evolve, and I'm probably the first one that's guilty of that, because I think someone was trying to like shame Dan, the great curator, for getting like a really nice Star Wars card, and he said, man, I got the grail, this is the grail card, and then he sold it like 2 months later. And
Mm.
I'm like, I'm kind of guilty of that too, and that's only because it's like I get that remember in Enfield, Connecticut, I got that Michael Jordan rookie that I was freaking out over for 3 hours. I finally get that. I grade it. It comes back a PSA 5, and to me that's a grail. And little did I know, within 3 months I'd be moving that PSA 5 to get into a BGS 9
Mm.
that was triple the value.
Yeah.
So like grails continue to evolve, and I think the longer we're in this hobby, the slower the game gets. You know what I mean? Almost like you know, when you're a rookie in your first NFL game, things are moving at the speed of light. It's like you can't even slow down for a second. And then the more comfortable you get, the more games you play, you start to see the game a little bit differently. You start to see the plays developing. Everything seems like it's slow motion, and you
Mhm.
could really start to pick the defense apart. It feels like that's how it is in the hobby. So I think I am using that term grail less. And when I actually do get something I consider a grail card, I've actually been socking them away. But
Mm.
with that being said, I do bring those cards to shows. I do put those cards in my case, and I put an incredibly high price tag on it, just so people know, like, okay, this guy's high on his
Yeah.
price. Like, that's fine. And I know you had talked about in your show how you don't want to do that because you don't want someone to see that high price and then just automatically assume your entire case is high. And then they're like, oh, this guy's high. But that's fine. Like you said, I mean, I'm
Yeah.
not really there to really walk away with a a wad of cash at the end of the day. I'm more there for the people. If I can make a couple deals, great, but just being able to see people and feel alive in this hobby, because I truly believe that shows are the lifeline of the hobby.
Mhm. Well said. Well said. And I'm there firsthand, and I can say no matter how many big cards you have, what the price tags are on them. I'll watch your case and your table, and you'll run off, and you'll come back with a smile ear to ear, holding up a card. Oh, I just like the excitement, like a little kid, right? And,
Yeah.
and there's nothing better than that, right? I mean,
No.
I do the same thing. I go off if I get a card I'm so excited about. I mean, I can't wait to come back and share it. But yeah, and a lot of it for me is I didn't even know this card existed. I didn't even know this was my Grail card until I saw it.
Yep.
So,
Yep,
um,
and I don't think you went to, Enfield, Connecticut. Shout out to Alex and Cliff if they're listening from, CNA, Promotions up there in Enfield and Plainville. But when you went to the Enfield show last month, which was in November, or
yeah,
no, it was December, it was December 3rd. When you went
yeah,
to
the first,
Enfield
yeah,
December 3rd, you
mhm,
did not I don't think you had your mind on getting an Ovechkin card, right? Because there's just not much hockey at shows. Maybe you did. Maybe you're like, hey, if I see one, great. But I
mhm,
mean, did you think you'd be picking up three? And that's how it is when you go to shows.
mhm,
It's one thing to be scrolling on eBay, scrolling on Instagram all the time. But when you're at a show and you see a card, like just like you said, that you've never seen before, and you realize, holy crap, between the cards I have on me or the cash I have in my pocket, that card can be mine.
yeah, yeah, and then
There's
all
no better feeling.
no, not at all, and I do have to say, shout out to Ryan, War Chief Cards.
Yep.
I saw him the week before at Terrytown. He was set up there, and it was Sunday. It was a little slow late in the day, and I was over there just going looking through all his cards. And it was one of those things when I left on the way home, I said, "Oh, there was like two of those that I really wanted." And I'm like, "Well, I know how to find them on Instagram. I can." And when I showed up that following week in Enfield and I saw him sitting there, I'm like, "Man, this deal is done. It's already done. Like, there's no way I'm not gonna walk away with these cards." And yeah, he gave me a great deal. So yeah, it's exciting. You saw me. I had that. I was that kid. I came back with
Oh,
that
yeah,
big
you ran right
smile.
up to me and you're like, "Check
Yeah,
out these cards."
I was
Yeah,
excited.
man.
So
Yeah.
so just to just change it up just a little bit, um, it's really funny because we've talked so many times about this, about I should have more guests on my show.
Yep.
And one of the things I always felt that I consume content, and it was a lot of the same people doing the interviews, and I kind of got to know people's stories, and I always felt like if I'm gonna bring one of those people on, don't I want to do something different. I don't want to talk about their hobby journey because everybody's kind of heard it, and I really didn't want to lose people. And I kind of spent my first season not doing many interviews. And I really have to congratulate you because the thing that I've been thinking on 50 episodes, probably, at least 35 episodes, um, you nailed it. You nailed it with these roundtables. I mean, it's just unbelievable what you've done with this. And I turn this on and I'm like, oh, why didn't I think of this? But it's just like this is it. This is where you've gone to the next level with this, right? You've just gone to that. You've just raised the bar on that. And it's not you're bringing these people on and we all know their stories and we're not hearing their story again. You're pairing these people up and I mean, you're putting bromances together. I mean, I hear some people going on. I'm like, whoa, where'd Rob go? Is he still in the room? Or is he? Are these two just on a date now? So it's just like you've really. I have to congratulate you. Like this month where you're doing 3 a week, and I just can't wait. To get up and listen to who's. I mean, I know who's next, so that's why I'm even more excited. because we talk all the time, but just congratulations, because you actually being able to put that together, you've nailed it. You've raised the bar now.
Thank you, man. I appreciate that. It's like, thank you, man. I really, really, man. And I, I, I completely agree with everything you said. Like, I you have people on your shows, you ask them what their hobby journey is, and even when I had people on for the first time, I have been trying to get away from that. I think my first 50 episodes or so, maybe I had 20 guests on, and that's always like the go-to. Like, so tell me, how'd you get back? Tell me about your hobby journey, and it's like, you figure probably like 60% of them are just like us, like they got back in at the beginning of the pandemic, we collected early on, and blah blah blah. And it's kind of the same thing, but as it's evolved, as I kind of hit episode 50, then episode 100, I stopped. I think I pulled back from asking about the hobby journey because I hate that. I hate that question. I mean, I think like if it's a good interview, slowly some of those little details might come out through the story, but I don't want to sit here and hear about your childhood as much as I love and respect the guests. I mean, I think as a listener, I kind of tune out, so yeah, I think the whole roundtable idea and is just like, I'm a big hip hop fan. So what I think about is, I look at some of these albums that get put together or some of these songs, and like they hip hop does something that really no other genre of music does, right? Like I can't ever remember hearing a rock song that had Ozzy Osbourne, Anthony Kiedis from Red Hot Chili Peppers, Kurt Cobain on it, and throw someone else in there. I can't ever remember there just being this monster collab of like the three biggest rock legends at that time. But in hip hop, it's done all the time. Like they'll take like three of the hottest rappers, put them on a track, each person gets a verse, and it's like it's tailor made for that. So in my head, I'm like, okay, I would love to be like the producer slash engineer of really putting together some cool roundtables of people that maybe they've met before or maybe they haven't. But what I'll do is, reach out to people, get them in a group chat, once they've agreed individually, and basically they want to know, okay, who else is going to be on and what's the topic going to be. That's usually the two questions. um and then once they're in, boom, I create a new group chat and I'm like, hey guys, looking forward to it. What are you guys thinking for recording time? What are you guys thinking for dates? But to put people together, and I'm really trying to cover such a vast array of topics. And the thing is too, one thing I've talked to you about, when you bring guests on, because I know for me, the first 10 or 20 episodes I did, I was really struggling for content. I felt like it was really like, I'm like, there's no way this show's going to last. So that's a big part of the reason why I started setting up at shows, because I'm like, okay, I'm going to really immerse myself in the hobby now. But as I continued to bring guests on, if I brought a guest on Monday, chances are that interview completely spurred a new topic idea for Friday's episode. So it's like I didn't even need to be setting up at shows, because the interview that I just had was chock full of so much information and so much talk that I just used that as a branch out. You know what I mean? So I think bringing on guests are so beneficial in so many ways. And when you do a pro and con list, there's probably 10 pros and maybe 2 cons.
Mm-hmm.
So
Well, I'm going to work on it. That's one of my goals for next year, is to start bringing more guests on.
well, listen, man, I know that there are some big names that are waiting to come on your podcast. So I think you need to stop being stubborn. You need to stop and you start sharing the mic, sharing the airtime, man, and getting these guests on, because the few guests that you've had on, I mean, it's been great. You
Yeah.
know, the episode that you do with Rohan, who's at Slab Sports Mafia, I mean, that was
Yeah.
phenomenal. When
Yeah.
you brought Craig on, at the beginning of season 1, that was phenomenal. Then you brought Craig back, and it was Craig and, Dave about the soccer.
Yep.
Thought that was phenomenal. Then
Mhm.
the roundtable episode that we all did, that was
Yeah.
phenomenal. So
That
it's
was great. Yeah. Yeah.
almost every episode where you've brought someone on
Yeah.
feels like it's been a
Yeah.
home run.
Well, even the ones with you, right? The hobby talk and the state of the hobby. Those were
Yeah.
great. Those were great episodes too.
100%, man. Without
Yeah.
a doubt. I
Yeah.
completely agree.
Yeah. Looking forward to those. Looking forward to next year. Looking forward to season 2.
I can't wait, and you don't have to give any spoilers, but I can't wait for season 2, episode 1 of yours to really hear what your planned goals or
Mhm.
whatever
Mhm.
2023 is going to look like for you in the hobby. I can't wait to hear what
Yeah.
these goals
Yeah.
are, you
Yeah.
know?
Yeah. I am very excited. Very excited. I'm going to be doing it from a new office too. So
Man.
brand new office, everything new. So I'm
New
pretty
office, who this?
yeah, pretty excited about that as well. Yeah, yeah. So look, we're getting on an hour here. Um, so we're probably going to wrap it up. I appreciate you coming on. I really do. And I appreciate the mentorship. I appreciate the friendship. It's just been an unbelievable year. And I'm just looking forward to the next year and bigger and better things.
Likewise, man. I feel the same, and now it's really no longer a mentorship, man. We're even, man. I learned just as much from you as you learn from me. You know what I mean? So that's just what it's all about. That's what friendship's all about. That's what the hobby's all about. It's just, and I think that is just the importance of finding at least one or two people that you can really build with in this hobby,
Mhm.
because I think about, just like I said, if you didn't start your podcast, I wouldn't be where I'm at with my podcast. I know that. And if we just never crossed paths in the hobby, I don't know where I'd be.
If I didn't
I
if I
might
didn't
not be
answer
here.
that one text, random text on a Saturday night, right? Do you
Yeah.
collect do you collect sports cards?
Yeah.
Changed everything. Yeah, nice. Well, I'm going to ask you to say it. I think everybody knows where to find you, but tell them anyways.
Yeah, you could find me at sportscard_lessons on Instagram. My YouTube is
Yeah,
sportscard therapist everywhere that you're watching or listening to Ken.
yeah,
So again, man, thank you for having me on. I cannot wait. I'm just as excited as you, I feel like, for season 2, man.
yeah.
So
So 2 weeks off. That's season 2, episode 1 or episode 51. What do you think? Now you just kept going. Do you go to season 2 back to episode 1, or do I go season 2, episode 51?
you know what's weird? So I actually do both. So when I post it on the podcast, I'll put, the title will be like episode 63, Ken from Sports Card Lessons. But then immediately when you look at the summary, the first thing there is season 2, episode 13.
Okay. All right.
So that
Yeah.
just, I mean, I don't know, because I feel like I want people to know how many total episodes I have, but then by reading the description,
Mhm.
it immediately tells you like, oh, okay, there's seasons, there's different seasons,
Yeah.
okay,
And
and really every season, I know for me, and I feel like it's gonna be like that for you. Every season's really had its theme,
mm,
and
yeah.
and it's
And
worked.
it's gonna be different, right? Because the hobby has changed from this whole first season. We watched the hobby change, and now coming into a new year, a new season, the hobby is a different place than it was last January, right? So the focus is going to be different too. Yeah,
So I was just on Crosstown Cardboard with fellow Wolfpack members of ours,
yeah,
Craig
yeah.
and Carmine, and that episode just dropped this past Wednesday, so this week as well. And we were talking about prices and whatnot, and why I really haven't been buying any big cards. It's one thing if you trade for big cards, because even if that card goes down, your card's going down, everyone's card's going down, it's still an even playing field. But when you're paying cash for big cards, that's when it's like, eh. And he was telling me about a Tiger Woods rookie auto out of 279 that he got at a 7K value just a few months ago. Right now, current comps are 4.
I know. Do you remember last year? That was one of my top 5 cards. Was the Tiger Woods rookie auto card?
Listen, man, that's a
Yeah.
big card. I would
Yeah.
love to have that. If
Yeah.
I had that, that would probably be sitting behind me right there on the screen.
Mm. I'd put him right next to Mike Tyson.
Nice, man. Nice.
Another guy I loved growing up. So, all right, man. 2 weeks. Listeners, thank you so much, because getting to 50 episodes, I couldn't get here without you, without you guys listening and the support and the feedback. You know, I say this all the time. I look at it as my report card, right? My when I get feedback and people talk, that just keeps me going. I really appreciate you.
And you couldn't have gotten here without Sherry either. Shout out to Sherry.
Shout out to Sherry. And she's like, she's like my proof, like you write something and you get somebody to proofread it.
Yeah.
Well, she proof listens to it, so she gets to listen before everybody else. So she always tells me, "Oh my God, the best episode ever." So, shout out to Sherry.
Listen, she's awesome, man. You got one of the best ones there, man.
Yeah. I said a few things. I've never actually won the lottery, but partner lottery with her, job lottery with my teaching career and my business, and friend lottery now, right, with you and the rest of the wolf pack. So it's
yeah, man.
It's definitely been a lot of wins for me. So go ahead, give us your tagline on your way out.
I get to give the tagline?
You give yours, I give mine. You can do it.
All right. I appreciate that, man. Guys, take care of yourself and your collection.
Thank you, everybody. Take care of yourselves, everyone around you. We'll see you in 2 weeks. Take care, Rob.
All right, man.